As a reminder, I do record these sessions to post up on our YouTube channel. So when the time comes for questions, if you don't want to be recorded, please say so, and I'm happy to pause that in order to honor your privacy. So let's sit tall. We'll close the eyes. Take a nice breath in and out. Allow yourself to land softly. Feel that with each inhalation, the body is being nourished. And with each exhalation, because of that nourishment, you are able to release unnecessary stress and tension and enjoy the vibrancy, the radiance of aliveness. And whatever exists between those two places, whatever tension or trauma, whatever stress, whatever struggle, bring yourself to a place of honoring that. Because as with every night, the morning comes and the sun rises. As with every struggle and tension, the time comes when it is released. And the radiance of aliveness becomes obvious once again. And so drawing the hands together in front of your heart. And together we'll lift our voices in one beautiful Om. Bowing the head to the heart, acknowledging all that is. And then drawing our faces back to center, release the hands. So the radiance of aliveness, such a beautiful term, right? Something that a lot of people talk about in the world right now, especially in the spiritual circles. That there is this beautiful essence to our aliveness. And there's a lot of conversation and marketing around how to get a hold of that aliveness and do something with it and use it and exploit it. And that's not its intention. That's not the intention. The intention is not to go out and get that aliveness so that we can somehow come into a place of great prosperity with regard to finances or, our business acumen or whatever it happens to be. The aliveness is a sacred gift that has been given to each and every one of us. And it is not something that we have to go anywhere else to get. The place that we need to go is inside of ourselves. The space in which that aliveness thrives is the space of consciousness, conscious awareness. And certainly there are tools and techniques that can support us in integrating, understanding, and even healing at times the traumas that we experience through this life. And some of those techniques are yoga, Reiki, acupuncture, so many. But we have to always remember that when we are attending a yoga class, when we are receiving a Reiki session, when we're receiving an acupuncture session or any other kind of a session, that session is not going to heal us. The thing that is going to heal us is the inner decision to heal. And what those experiences, whether you're working through your yoga postures, breathing your pranayama, or having someone's hands hovering over you, those experiences are mere reminders of the power that already exists within you. What they're doing is opening the window a little bit and saying, you see, the air in here has gotten rather stagnant, so let's let a little bit of fresh air in here and remind you that there's a greater circulation. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, happiness in our human form is influenced by three things. And they are called the gunas. The G-U-N-A, gunas. They are tamas, T-A-M-A-S, rajas, R-A-J-A-S, and sattva, S-A-T-T-V-A. He says our happiness, our human happiness, is influenced and impacted by these three qualities of nature. And these three qualities, which I'll explain in a moment, but they're present everywhere. They're present in you, they're present in your mind, they're present in the weather, they're present in the objects in this room, they're present everywhere. They're present in animals and insects and planets and stars and everything, everywhere. They are a way for us to understand the qualities that certain things bring forward, as well as the inherent quality of the thing itself. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's look at tamas. Tamas is lethargy, dullness. Tamas is, in one regard, in the fall, when you rake your leaves and you make a big pile of leaves, the leaves on the bottom become what? Stagnant, dormant. There is also a vitality that's going on there, which is a very subtle vitality that we don't often think about. But generally we say, those leaves are dead and they're rotting. Right? They're not growing anymore. So that's one kind of a description of tamas, that it has this dull, losing its vitality, losing energy, becoming dormant. And not in the way that meditation brings us to a sense of dormancy, because that is a vibrant dormancy that is based in God consciousness, but a dormancy that is dull and not radiant. In our own lives, tamas is like when you've eaten too much ice cream and you've put pizza on top of it. Right? You all know what I'm saying? Can't get up off the couch, right? Yeah. That's the sluggishness that takes hold. And when you've had too much ice cream, maybe a gallon, Breyers, chocolate chip mint, right? And you've had the pizza with all the toppings on top of it. Do you feel happy? Do you feel satiated? Do you feel vibrant, like, the whole world is absolutely beautiful? No. It might have felt that way at the first bite, but by the end of the gallon and the pizza, you were more likely saying to yourself, why did I do that? Why didn't I just stop? And those types of thoughts are also tamasic. Those deep inner judgmental thoughts, they're very tamasic. They keep you in a state of self-condemnation. They keep you in a state of this unnecessary guilt, unnecessary self-loathing. And those two emotions are very, very tamasic. The turtle is tamasic in relation to the hare, right? Remember the old fable? Yeah. Standing water is tamasic in relation to a running stream. A rainstorm is tamasic in relationship to a sunny day. So tamas is very relative. It's also very relative. It depends on what it is that you're looking at. But you can't miss the qualities of tamas, because they are not qualities that prompt growth and involution and evolution. They are qualities that do typically tend to promote a sense of stuckness, a sense of, I don't really want to grow, a sense of faithlessness and hopelessness. It's pretty obvious how that impacts our human happiness, isn't it? It's very, very obvious. But Krishna tells Arjuna this in the Bhagavad Gita, because apparently it wasn't all that obvious. Or maybe it's obvious, but it's so obvious that we overlook it. It's so darn obvious that we overlook it. And we say, but I like ice cream and pizza. Mm-hmm. At least that first bite. And we think that we will get the same happiness and joy out of the second, third, and 3400th bite. And therein lies the problem, is that our minds and our hearts stay stuck in what was and continually try to recreate it. And that process of trying to recreate the past is a very tamasic approach to life. Keeps us stuck in a place that is no longer happening. So how do we find happiness there? If we remain stuck there, we can't. It's just not possible. On the opposite end of the spectrum, we have Rajas, R-A-J-A-S, Rajas. And Krishna tells Arjuna that Rajas is passion. It is excitement. It is passion that causes us to run to a thing. It is the excitement that builds up inside of us. And initially we might think, well, that's not bad. We should be excited about life. No. Well, we need to understand that there's a slight difference between excitement and enthusiasm. Excitement is when you go from kind of neutral to extreme. And that's a very tiring experience, don't you think? Yeah. And can we ever really get enough? Remember when you were younger and would go to the amusement park, or maybe you brought your kids or your grandkids to the amusement park this past summer, and it was like they got so excited about going. And then when they went, it was just more excitement on top of more excitement. And by the end of the day, they were probably screaming and crying that they didn't want to leave, and they were tired, and they were falling asleep as they're walking. And so, yeah. But this is what we all do. It's not just the little ones, right? We don't really ever grow out of that habit. We let passion take us for a ride, like we are without reins on the back of a wild horse, trying not to let the branches and twigs smack us around as the horse runs. And we haven't quite learned how to ride that horse yet. And so there's this danger, this concern, this caution, And when we allow passion to be present in our life that way, where it's literally out of control, then we begin to experience something in our nervous system called the fight, flight, or freeze response. Because our body can only take so much impact. And that's not just physical impact, it's also emotional, mental impact. Where, when I was younger, I used to say, every year, I'm not going to set a New Year's intention. Instead, I'm just going to take that year and do something that I haven't done before. And so, one year I did scuba diving lessons. Another year I did, street defense lessons based in karate. Another year I did something else. And one year it was I'm going to go to all of the music concerts that I haven't got to. Locally, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I was so excited. Man, by the end of week 2, I was so tired. And it literally, just the thought of it, and it's music. It's a beautiful thing, right? But I set myself up for this feeling that I was supposed to have this extreme excitement about this amazing summer. And if I didn't follow through on the whole summer, including the last weekend of it, then I somehow failed myself. And that made each decision more and more anxious. And that anxiety put me into a state where I ended up not really wanting to go. Because it was tiring, it was depleting, it was harmful to my nervous system. And that's kind of a silly example. I'm sure in your own mind, some of you are already thinking of an example from your own life where you've done that to yourself. Put yourself into a state of constant low-grade anxiety or stress over something that you originally had great excitement over, great passion, great rajas. Do, go, go, go. Make. it becomes force, force, force. And force will break you. Force will break you. So tamas on one end, rajas on the other end. Rajas in our relationships too. Rajas in our relationships. And that's the number one issue with relationships. It's the number one hurdle. If we could just get over the rajasic nature of our relationships, we would find that our relationships would be much smoother and last much longer. But the thing is this, we see someone and we're like, oh, attractive person, I want that. And then, it's true, right? And then sometimes whether or not we're in a single place, right? We run after that person. And based on outer appearances, there is an excitement. There is a rajasic tendency that comes forward. And we begin to idolize them, thinking that they are the be-all, end-all of all that is. And they're so cool. And if only I could have them on my arm, I would finally look like the person I think I am. And so we build them up. And then we start to get to know them. And then we start to try to change them. Because they're not what we built up in our mind at all. They're just another human being like we are, with flaws like we have, with limitations like we have, with dreams like we have. But they have their own limitations and dreams. But in order for them to stay in line with our rajasic expectations of them, we want them to align with our dreams. And we want them to help us overcome our limitations. And if they're busy on their spiritual path, working on their own self, how can they tend to ours? They're not supposed to tend to ours. They should not have to do that. But we enter into these relationships with such passion that we never give the friendship an opportunity to blossom. We don't allow the honoring. We don't allow enough time for the respect to be nurtured. We don't witness consciously each step that another person takes and really hold in high regard the struggle that other person goes through. When was the last time that you did that? That you just looked at another person and said to yourself, every step they take is with such amazing intention, whether they know it or not. They're seeking in their heart the experience of healing and wholeness, just like I am. I have no right to impose myself in that. And if we came into our relationships with that thought in our mind, just imagine how much that would change the relationship. It would make it so much more clear to us. Or, I don't know if clear is the right word. It would certainly be a very direct and obvious message about what our place in that relationship should actually entail. Whether we should stay or whether we should go. How much we should expect. So we have rajas and we have tamas, and boy, are they instigators. Instigators of suffering, right? Instigators of suffering. I just got a really weird image in my mind. When I was younger, I used to like the horror movie shows, right? And so there's this one B-rated flick called Puppet Master, right? And I think like that went on to make like 2,700 variations. But the first one was the one, right? And in there's like these little puppets running around with like pitchforks and stuff, right? So here you have tamas and you have rajas, and they're running around with pitchforks chasing you down the hall. Come back here. Yeah, that's funny. Anyway, I digress. So as the Buddha said, the great Buddha said, there is a middle way. There is a middle way. And the middle way we call sattva. And the word sattva, it means purity. It can be translated as purity. It can be translated as balance. It could be translated as not rajas, not tamas, but something else that is more neutral. And when we come at life, when we walk through life, when we experience life, from a heart that is saturated with sattvic qualities, then many things will tend to fall into a greater alignment, and we will have a much deeper understanding of why challenges appear, why obstacles appear, why people appear, why challenges fall away, why obstacles fall away, and why people walk away. And we won't have the tendency to become tamasically hopeless or rajasically angry and blaming as a result. Instead, we'll see things sama, with sameness. We'll see things and look for the dharma first, the karma first. And not the karma that's so popularized in the West right now. People call her all kinds of names, and they don't fit her. She's not a bitch. Okay? She's also not a payback system. There is, of course, cause and effect. There's consequence to every single action. But that's what karma means. Karma means action. So you just nodded your head. That was karma, right? And so here's something to think about. So just think about, maybe somebody in the room has said this. Someone stole your parking spot or did something to irritate you, and you thought karma's going to get you. Later you saw that person and like they hurt their hand or something. You were like, I told you karma would get you, right? But then you have to apply that very interesting wisdom, faux wisdom, to every single thing that happens. And so you just nodded your head, and then you got a kink in your neck, and it hurt. Well, you shouldn't have nodded your head. It doesn't work, right? It doesn't work. So that's not what karma is. Karma is not a payback. It is an action and consequence. And the consequence is not always a negative. And it's not a negative for a negative either. Because sometimes really amazing things come forward as a result of what we would consider harmful acts. And sometimes really horrible things come forward with what we would consider to be, good acts. So we need to move ourselves beyond this idea that karma is a payback system and into the idea of self-responsibility. Where do I want to reside in my own life? In the tamasic qualities, in the rajasic qualities, or in the sattvic qualities? And why does that decision even matter? Well, it matters for many reasons. Basically, to reside in a sattvic heart means that you are living your life actively and in a way that is mindful of violence and harm caused upon one's own self and upon others. And the more that you live mindful of your own intentions, words, and actions, and the pain and suffering that they inflict on yourself and others, the less you are going to commit those actions and cause that pain. The less pain and suffering you cause others, the less guilt you have to feel, the less grief you will have to go through over those unnecessary sufferings. And the more that will free up your inner self to do the truest work of your own healing, which is completely internal. But right now, we're like light bulbs. We're diffused. You take a 40 watt light bulb, just a regular house light bulb. If it was night out, you turn the light on in here and it would light up the darkness in the room, right? And we all think that's pretty powerful. So we run through the world, spreading our energy out into 10,000 directions, and we think that's pretty powerful. Climb to the top of Machu Picchu, dive to the bottom of the ocean. I don't know, get on the ship that's going out to space if you've got the money. Whatever. Run a marathon after marathon after marathon. It's like the more I can do. But don't forget, the more you do, the more you're diffusing your energy. I'm not telling you not to do it. What I'm saying is understand that the more that you try to squeeze into a 24-hour day without self-care, the more diffused your light becomes. You take that same 40-watt light bulb and you put it into a particular kind of a spectrometer that has a tube that takes all the light of the light bulb and orients it through this tube, and it becomes a laser beam. And that laser beam from a 30, 40-watt light bulb can cut through steel. Your light bulb in the ceiling can't cut through steel. Because why? It's diffused. But the light oriented from that very same light bulb in a particular way certainly can. So the karma of our actions, when we commit ourselves to actions that are violent and harmful, creates a diffusion in life that inhibits our strength, our courage, our ability to love, inhibits our faith and our growth spiritually, as well as socially, as well as in every other realm. But when we take our words, our intentions, and our actions and we infuse them with sattvic qualities, and I'm going to tell you some of those in a moment, then we are honing our energy. We're becoming brilliant, bright, strong, courageous. Sattvic qualities: patience, stillness, peace, compassion, empathy, faith, inner joy, humbleness. These are all sattvic qualities. And when we look at these qualities, there's a kind of confusion that burdens us. Because we look at the quality humble, humility, and we often misunderstand it, and it becomes devalued and placed in the tamasic category. I can't be humble, that's weak. Weakness is tamasic. Humbleness is sattvic. Humbleness and weakness are not the same thing. As a matter of fact, I would suggest to you that to be truly humble requires great strength. The kind of strength that, as spiritual seekers, we must cultivate in our own hearts and minds. If we cannot be humble, then we are being the opposite of humble. And the opposite of humble is egotistical. And as long as we are being egotistical, we will not have a room in our hearts for anyone else, including ourselves, no matter how often we tell ourselves otherwise. Love will always be deeply conditional. Acceptance will always be deeply conditional. And other people's behavior, we will always deeply judge as being a violation of our expectation or in alignment with our expectation. But truly, who are we to expect anything of anybody? We don't even live up to those ideals. We don't live up to them ourselves. So who am I to say to you, you must be truthful? Am I completely truthful? Who am I to say to you, you must be completely nonviolent? Am I completely nonviolent? We need to turn those expectations around to ourselves and say, humbly, the areas of my life where violence still exists, that's the area where I need to do my work. And if I'm looking at another person and I'm saying, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to do this, then all I'm doing is avoiding what I need to do. That's it. So when we talk in yoga, in Advaita Vedanta and Shaktism, when we talk about the ethics of yoga, when we talk about non-harming, non-stealing, truthfulness, and all the others, we're not saying, you must do this. What we're saying is, I must do this. And this is something worthwhile for all of us together to explore, if that's what you choose to do. Does that make sense? Yeah. So, the radiance of aliveness comes from this space, at least in some part, of knowing the difference between tamas, rajas, and sattva. And not condemning tamas and rajas, but understanding them. Because there's a time for tamas when you sleep. And there's a time for rajas when you're working. Tamas empowers sleep, but sattva empowers good sleep. Rajas empowers work, but sattva empowers meaningful work. Rajas without sattva is burdensome work. I hate this job. Right? That would be a little tamas too. But rajas married with sattva, with regard to our work, makes work fulfilling. We begin to see the work as an offering. Too oftentimes we compartmentalize. We say, my aliveness is over here, and then I have a job, and then I have this responsibility and that responsibility and that responsibility. I can't wait to get back over to my aliveness again. The reality is that your aliveness is not absent in any of those things. Those things are part of your aliveness, if they're what you're choosing to do in this life. And for you to segregate them out, for anyone to segregate them out and to say, well, my 9 to 5 is my 9 to 5. I'll just suffer through it. Is to be that bulb on its last leg. And to allow tamasic qualities to steal your hope and joy from you, and rajasic qualities to burn you out so that you don't even have the energy to enjoy the little moments that do come along. So to abide in a place of sattva more often than rajas and tamas, in that we don't take things personally, in that I own nothing, so no one owes me anything. In that the heart longs to be of service to the world, so allow it to be. In your spiritual studies, in all the things that bring you to a greater place of balance. Because when you feel truly balanced, which is typically a very fleeting experience. It comes and it goes, comes and goes, comes and goes. But when you feel truly balanced, not only in that moment are you experiencing happiness, but you are also no longer a threat to anyone else's happiness. And you're no longer adding to their suffering. That's huge.
Say that one more time.
Sure. So when you are living a life that is balanced, and you're experiencing that balance within yourself, there's a few things that are happening. Not only are you experiencing the joy of that, the simple joy of that, but also you are no longer, in that moment, a hindrance to anyone else's happiness. And you are no longer contributing to their suffering. Does everybody get that? Does that make sense? Because when we exist in a state of chaos or dullness or hopelessness or, too much passion and excitement, we're constantly contributing to other people's suffering. And as a result of that, we're taking away the moments that they could be experiencing happiness. One example would be If I happen to be an overly dramatic person and I'm constantly complaining about everything and I'm constantly causing you to worry about me, that's stealing from you. That's stealing from you. And then when I really do need help, if I come to you and say, I really need your support, you're going to be like, not again. Right? And then you're going to have turmoil over that because you're going to feel like, oh, now I'm not a good person because I don't really want to help this person, but they're always asking for help. So you see, it comes back to us. Always. Are we living our life code aligned with tamas, aligned with rajas, or aligned with sattva? I'm going to do a time check. Oh, very good. So any questions or reflections so far? Any questions or reflections so far? Yes?
How do we deal with people who steal our happiness?
So that's a really great question. The first thing that we have to look at in that statement, and you're not the only one who asked that. I would suggest to you, whenever I talk on this subject, many people have that question. More than not. The first thing we have to do is look at the structure of what we're saying. What do we do about people that steal our happiness? Do you believe that you've been given free will? Do you all believe you've been given free will? So you all believe you have free will. Is your free will the right to exercise as you wish, to some degree, your own actions? So can anyone actually steal something from you? Something internal. I'm not talking about your car. Of course they could take that. But something from you. Can they actually steal it? Or through your own free will, you make the choice to give it to them. So that's the first lesson to know. But that's a really big statement. Because we also have to have the tools to understand that it is our own choice to give our power away or to keep it. And those tools we typically accumulate through life. We're taught by mentors. Maybe we learn in the religion or the spirituality that we adhere to. Maybe we come to yoga class and learn there. Somewhere along the line, we hopefully pick up the tools necessary to at least begin to understand how to navigate relationships based on free will, on what we're willing to give away and what we're willing to accept. But too often in today's world, those tools aren't being taught. They're being replaced, dare I say, by things like consumerism and hyper-judgmentality and victimization and over-traumatization of day-to-day burdens, which are not necessarily traumas. I mean, they are, but they're not, you know. Waking up on the wrong side of the bed is not a trauma, right? Sorry, it's not. So we're becoming really confused. And when we become confused, what happens is we no longer see clearly that we have free will. We no longer see that clearly. And then my free will is replaced by your will. And where that comes from is a tamasic place of not believing that you are strong enough to set the boundaries necessary to keep yourself safe, at least mentally and emotionally. I'm not talking about complex trauma here, because complex trauma is much different. That's a complete exploitative manipulation, so I'm not talking about that. But your average healthy person, your kind of average day-to-day person who's going through life, they give away their power of free will because the burden sometimes of having that power is overwhelming. The responsibility of it. So if you want to be able to say, or if you want to be able to feel that other people cannot steal from you what is inside of you, like your joy or your happiness, then you need to set the boundaries in place that exercise your free will to keep your power. And that doesn't mean looking at the other person and saying, hey, you're a bad person, you stay away from me now, because that's not really going to solve it either. What it is to say, there's a certain behavior, there's a certain tendency on your own part as well as on the part of the other person that you won't engage in anymore. And it's not just because the other person behaves poorly, it's also because you don't currently have the skills to deal with that behavior. When we set boundaries, I talked a few years back, it was during the Me Too movement. Over at the college, I was part of a panel discussion on healthy boundaries. And there's a lot of talk about boundaries. And there's a lot of talk about keeping people out with boundaries. It's why you put up a fence around your property, is to keep people out. And that example is oftentimes used in regard to healthy boundaries. Well, it's putting up a fence to keep people out. But actually, that's not what the boundary is for. The boundary is not necessarily to keep people out. The boundary is to give you enough space to do the work that you need to do so that you can have the skills to work through those relationships. And so you don't have to feel so victimized by them. So your boundaries are about you more than they are about the other person. And I'm not talking like legal boundaries here. Legal boundaries are another situation. Complex trauma boundaries are another conversation. But day to day, as we're walking through life, when we say, okay, one of the boundaries that I'm going to do is I'm not going to let people who don't look happy bother me. I'm going to smile at them. Well, that's not because you're afraid of those people. It's because you judge them, right? It's because you judge them. Because somebody walks past you with a scowl on their face and you think it's about you. You hyper-personalize it. And then all of a sudden you're telling yourself a story about this person, about what a jerk they are, this, that, and the other thing. And you don't even know them. So the boundary, and the boundary here is saying whenever I see someone who's unhappy, I'm going to smile. That boundary is not for the other person. It's because you need the space to learn how to be less judgmental. Yeah. It's a great question. Yeah, it's a great question. So to begin that journey, the first thing we need to understand is this person isn't stealing anything from me necessarily. They may be manipulative. They may be trying to have their needs met. I'm not going to be able to meet those needs and mine in the same moment. So distance is necessary. And that's the hard part, right? That's the hard part. To distance and to not feel bad about it. But the reality is, and this is particularly for the women in the room, but I think men nowadays are also starting to feel the burden of guilty self-care, right? Like you don't have a right to take care of yourself or something. Women have been raised on that, It's like we take the burnt toast, as it says, right? Yeah, moms always take the burnt toast, so nobody else has to deal with the burnt toast, and everybody else gets the nice golden toast. Right? Yeah. And I think that this is being put on men nowadays too, more and more and more. But we have to come out of the mindset that doing something that truly takes care of ourselves, that we need to feel bad about that somehow. We don't. Happiness is our birthright. It's our life right. Joy is our birthright. It really is. And there is a certain kind of necessary suffering that is also our birthright. And if we wish to experience our birthright, then we need to have some kind of self-care in place. Otherwise, that diffuse light bulb burns out, and so do we. And what I mean by necessary suffering is that there's two sufferings. We've talked about this before for those who come continually. There's the necessary suffering of living inside of a biological body that is always changing and prone to injuries and aging and these things. And we can't change that necessarily. We can only kind of be harmonious with it. And then there's unnecessary suffering, which is basically what is brought about in our life as a result of abiding too much in the tamas, too much in the rajas, and not enough in the sattva. Yeah. Other questions? Thank you for your question. What is your name, if you don't mind me asking? Savannah. Thank you so much for your question. Any other questions or reflections? Any others? Yes.
It seems sometimes it's really difficult to see like the cycle of tamas and rajas when you're in it, and then there's like this hindsight process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And as humans, that's like with everything. It's just true. Our hindsight is so much more 20/20. Because when we're in the midst of it, we're in this investment, and we don't. I mean, even in archaeology, so some of you know my PhD is in biological archaeology, and so I studied many different things, but one of them was what happened to people's health during the transition of hunting and gathering to cultivation and cultivation to agriculture. And what did we see as far as pathological changes in the human body as a result of this? And in hindsight, we see a lot. We see that once they started plowing fields, like they would take first to the hand plows. And we're talking, indigenous Americans or indigenous populations as well as early Americans. We see an increase in broken bones. Yeah. We see the movement away from a very diverse, seasonally based diet where they're eating maybe something a little bit different every meal to mono, duo cropping, trio cropping, the three sisters for the most part, but a hyper focus, particularly on corn in the West, particularly on corn. And the impact that had on the human body was an increase in anemia and other phytate-oriented imbalances in the body. Phytate is a chemical that inhibits the absorption of iron in your body, right? So, but they didn't know that. They just thought, oh my God, we have all this corn. Yay, praise to God. This is your blood. Thank you so much for sharing it with us. They didn't know, But we look back at the skeletons and we see really clearly, so clearly, the porosity in the bones and the other issues. So hindsight is just glorious. But the key to hindsight is that we do what the mind does really well. We then use it in the future. We apply it now. What did I learn yesterday? What did I learn yesterday about when someone says something to me like, hi? What did I learn yesterday about reacting? What did I learn yesterday about forcing? What did I learn yesterday? And until we become, deeply integrating our lessons into this present moment, we need to apply consciously what we have learned to what we're going through now. Yeah, it's a great question.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Sure, of course.
So I was going to ask about like in yoga philosophy perspectives on practices. Just as that, it sounds like one practice you're saying is sort of the application. Mm-hmm. Are there other practices, or is that spoken to in yoga philosophy and the writings of like how to cultivate mindfulness around that, or?
And so do you mean just like we have the yoga asana? So do you mean other practices in addition to that?
Yeah, like just is it like the idea of like how to observe those shifts? And
Sure. Yeah. Yes, and so there is a plethora of techniques in yoga that are meant to hone our ability to be consciously aware. And that is everything from the yoga postures, the pranayama, which is the breathing practices and the process of being present to the breath and listening to the wisdom of the breath and where it's telling you the knots are tied very tight in your body and mind. There is also mantra meditation, which through the use of sacred sound sacred sound that, simplifying it greatly, sacred sound that exists in your body already, harmonizing, balancing the body using these sounds as a way, almost like a sounding fork, right? Like a tuning fork, using these sacred mantras to harmonize the body and mind. There's Ayurveda and lifestyle practices. Every single lifestyle practice you can think of is covered in Ayurveda. There is mudra, and mudra is gestures, primarily with the hands, but also with the feet, and then all other parts of the body. And it's the impact on the nervous system of touch. And so I'm not going to go deeply into any of these because they're all very big topics in and of themselves. But yes, there's so many different techniques that teach us how to come into or closer to this present moment in a way that is very mindful and aware. Tratak meditation is another one. Candle gazing is another one. Drishti is another one. Teaching us how to go from being the diffuse light bulb to being more like the laser beam. Yeah. All of the techniques of yoga are meant to do that. Not necessarily, at least initially, so that we can walk through the world honing ourselves into this moment, but for the purpose of meditation, to bring us toward meditation and then into meditation and beyond meditation into samadhi and beyond samadhi into turiya. And turiya is the experience of complete unity. Yeah. But we have to start here where we are right now. This is the practical part, right? Yeah. Yes?
I have a question that's more about opportunity. I saw that you had something online. I was hoping that maybe you could explain that a little bit more. There's something that's coming up that is new.
There's a few things that are coming up. Is it the Atma Bodha?
I don't remember.
So we have... so I recently put together a 7-year study in the Yoga Advaita Vedanta. And so this study, which people can come in and out of as they need to, is made up of 20 modules. And each one of those modules deals with a different spiritual text within the Advaita Vedanta tradition. Right now, we're working through the Tattva Bodha, which is called a pramana, and that is a means of knowing. And so this first text is a very foundational text that teaches you core concepts and gives you some understanding upon which you'll build. The next text that we're doing, which begins in, I think, the last week of February, I'm not sure, it's online, is the Atma Bodha. And the Atma Bodha is a text that explores the meaning of the innermost true self. And then from there we go on. And each module deals with another scripture. And so it meets for 16 consecutive Monday nights on Zoom for about an hour from 7 to 8, 8:15, sometimes, in all honesty, 8:30. Just depends on what the conversation's doing. And so each module is 16 weeks. And I decided to do this because so many students were coming to me and saying, the yoga classes are wonderful and I learned so much in the wisdom circle. What do I do for continuity and to feel like I'm growing in my understanding rather than a little bit here and a little bit there? And so I put this study together, this 7-year program. But again, you don't have to take the entire thing. It is open to drop-ins, but it is also open to the aspiring spiritual seeker who really wants to come into a deep understanding. And there will be, like right now, it's a lot of lecture. In some of the modules, there will be a meditation and a breathing component as well. But no asana in there at all. Meditation and breathing. Maybe some mudra later. Yeah.
Thank you. That's exactly what I was talking about. I knew it was Monday night.
Yeah, Mondays from 7 to 8. And registration is open online for that as well.
And then when do you upload because this was a whole lot of great information today. When do you upload it on Zoom? Because I like to re-listen.
Within about an hour.
Oh.
Yeah. This will be uploaded. It'll be on our YouTube channel. And then I typically share it over to the Facebook page also. So you can also check my Facebook page later today. It'll be up there.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions or reflections? Yes.
Yeah, kind of going off of that, will you be posting any putting more like yoga sequences to YouTube?
Oh, we have a bunch of yoga sequences online. Yeah, absolutely. So if you go to our website under the media, you'll find a whole list there. There's beginner level 1, beginner level 2, yin, metta meditation, and on the YouTube channel, there's a bunch there as well. Yeah, there's a lot on the YouTube channel. I think there's on the order of over 200 or 300 talks that I've given. There's classes. There's all types of things up there for you. Yeah. Any other questions or reflections from today's? Yes, Carissa.
Just a reflection on the years of my spiritual journey, and as it's progressed, I've become very aware of when I'm in a tamasic state of I never knew those words to put to it, but I could feel when I was feeling like stagnant and low and dull, and times where I was just like, I feel very balanced, I feel great. And it's interesting though, because just speaking from my personal experience, when I feel that that balanced state, I feel very aligned, I feel joy, and it's all transient. I tend to plummet right to tamasic right after, and it's kind of like my awareness is becoming more and more strong of it, of like the whole, in and out of all of it, and honoring it all. But I guess it's still very hard, as it's a rough landing coming down to tamasic, and I feel like so low, and I'm like, what can I do to just get back to that, state where I feel balanced and I just feel like so peaceful, and it's just like trying to honor that hard landing is tough.
It's very difficult, and it's a great reflection to have. So I think that we sometimes make the mistake of thinking that tamas, sattva, and rajas are 100% completely independent of one another, right? And I'm either rajasic or I'm tamasic or I'm balanced. I'm either, excited and chaotic, or I'm dull and lethargic, or I'm happy, right? Happy and balanced aren't the same thing, first of all. What is balanced? Balanced is appropriate. Balanced is not going off into extremes. Balanced is the ability to be present to whatever it is that you need to be present to. Balanced is the ability to hold space for yourself and for others. So, just kind of as an example, we get this picture in our mind that if I'm balanced, I'm walking around with a smile on my face all the time. Some of the most balanced people I know walk around with a scowl on their face all the time. But their hearts are joyful. So balance is not about smiling all the time. And when we have a generally balanced state of being, when we eat well, sleep well, meditate regularly, have a spiritual sadhana, when we're actively working on ourselves, and things are going fairly smoothly, as they will at times, and then something happens in life that jolts us. We lose a loved one, a relationship ends, a job ends, something happens. Then it's not all of a sudden that our balance is ripped away from us for the sake of grief and suffering. No. We carry our balance into that experience and we say, grief, I'm with you. You're with me. Anger, I'm with you. And you're with me. Sadness, depression, whatever it happens to be. And we gather it in. And we say, I'm not going to sweep you under the rug. I'm not going to ignore you. I'm not going to avoid you. I'm not going to hate on you. I'm not going to wish you were something else. Maybe you are going to wish it's something else, but just a little bit less, maybe. Instead, I'm going to love you. I'm going to hold you and ask you what you need from me. I'm going to be of service to you. And then you know that the ego plays tricks. So let's say that you've crashed into that tamasic place, and the tamasic voice comes back and says, well, I just need to sit here and eat the ice cream. Right? Well, then the sattvic, with a little bit of rajasic, comes back and says, no, love. That's not what you need. Let's get up and go for a walk in nature, even though you don't want to, because that is what will nurture your soul. So there is an honesty here, which is a straightforward honesty, but it's not straightforward and critical. It's straightforward and loving. It says, no, dear, you don't need the ice cream. You want the ice cream. There's a difference. What you need, let's go find out. And then you begrudgingly drag your sorry butt up off the couch. And you go, And then maybe you bribe yourself a little bit too. And you say, well, if you go for a 5-mile walk around the park, 1 mile. If you go for a 1-mile walk around the park, you can have a small little cup of ice cream, But then you're going to be so invigorated by the fresh air, maybe you won't even want the ice cream. But if you do have the ice cream, then you love the ice cream. You don't hate on the ice cream while you're putting it in your body. Because that's the other thing too, right? That leads to such tamas and such rajas. It leads to rage and self-hatred. Is when we do something and then we hate on it. When we give in to the second piece of cake, and as we're eating it, we're like, I don't believe I'm doing this, but it just is like so good. I want more. If instead we acknowledge, we just said, look, I'm taking a second piece of chocolate cake because I really have more faith in my lacking than I have in my abundance, and I'm misguided by thinking that this chocolate cake is going to fill that lack. But I don't have the wherewithal to put the cake down right now, so I'm going to eat it honestly. Eventually that will bring you to a different relationship with it. What else were you going to say, Carissa?
So how do you have that awareness of, those emotions, like you're saying, like sadness and grief, but not attach yourself to it when you become aware of it?
So you know my husband died. Mm-hmm. Right? So when my husband passed away, he was here, and he passed away in our living space, and I made the calls that I had to make for them to come and to hospice and whatnot. And I sat with him and I just held his hand, and I felt the grief. It was flowing with me. It was with me. And then they came in and they removed his body, and I knew he was no longer there. But while they were there, first hospice came and I supported her. I helped her cleaning him and preparing him and putting things together that would be not interned with him, he cremated with him. And then when the hearse came, when the funeral home came, I walked outside. And when I walked outside, the grief overcame me. And I literally fell down to the ground and couldn't breathe. And instead of being embarrassed about it, worrying that it looked like too much, thinking anything else, I just wrapped my arms around myself. And I said, even if I were to die right now, I would die knowing how much I love my husband, because this grief is a testament to that. And eventually I got my breath back. And I apologize for getting a little bit flustered, but eventually I got my breath back, and I stood back up. And I just stood there. And I looked up, because looking up always gives me a grounding of an interesting way. I looked up, and it was dusk, so there were still stars. And I looked up and I said, I know that that's where you are now. And I know that you couldn't stay. I know you had to leave. And I love you. And I'll do my best. And I walked back inside and made sure that everything was done that needed to be done. And then continued from that day forward, being with my grief as part of my balance. Being with my grief as part of my sattvic practice. Being with it. Not saying, oh, now's too inconvenient of a time. No. Being with it. It's hard though, right? It's hard. And it's still fresh. I mean, my husband, he passed away 3 years ago. So it's not a long time. And the waves of grief still go. They're further, the grief is further between now. But I'll be driving down the road and a song will come on, forget it. The song will come on and it'll be like, okay, the tears need to come. And so you let them. You don't say, well, how do I stop crying? You don't. You don't. You don't stop crying. You let the tears come. Tears are a cleansing for your body. They're not a curse. Little anatomical aside, and then we'll end for today, but you have this hormone in your body called cortisol. And comparatively to the other hormones in your body, it's what's called a large hormone. Because it's bigger and it's difficult to break down in comparison to some of the other hormones in your body. And so many of your other hormones, they're easily evacuated through urine and sweat and feces and whatnot. Cortisol's not so easy though. The one primary way that you can regulate cortisol in your body is by crying. Tears. Comes out the tears. So, and what is cortisol but the hormone of stress, right? Cortisol is the hormone of stress. Cortisol is also a foundational influence in heart disease. So you know that there's a relationship between stress and deep, intense periods of grief that you're not dealing with and heart disease. And science knows this, research knows this, we know this, but we still don't cry. Cry. Allow yourself to. And then the beautiful gift of it is that when you allow yourself, when you practice your free will to cry when you need to cry, then you become more accepting of what is and more peaceful eventually with it. Because there's nothing I can do to change it anyway, right? So it's either deny, and fight, resist, or accept. But I don't want to accept under false pretenses. I don't want to just say, oh, I accept it, and then not really. I want to really accept it. Really accept it. And in that acceptance, there is a necessary suffering. There is necessary suffering there. And I'm willing to accept that too. As I hope you all are. Yeah. All right, time check. We've gone over now. I apologize. We did so good. I did the Q&A at 10 after. All right, yeah. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for being here. As always, it's a joy to gather with you and to share what little bit I've learned on this path and in this life. And I hope it's purposeful for you. So let's sit tall, close the eyes. Take a nice breath in and a nice breath out. Draw the hands together in front of the heart. And together we'll lift our voices in one Om. Breathing in. Om. Namaste. Hari Om. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Thank you all for being here. So lunch is being served. If you haven't eaten already, please do go and enjoy it. certainly looks good. And, you know, I say that every week, but it's just the truth. Be well, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.